Saint Mangat Ji's Story in English, Part 5, Introduction. This commentator is reading from the book A Master and a Seeker, written by Professor Somraj Gupta. It is available on Amazon.com. Please see the description below and also visit the site samtavad.org, samtavad.org for more information. This commentator read the life story of Mangat Ji or Maharaji first time in 1992. It completely transformed his life. Instead of constant fear and worry, he had indescribable bliss and peace. It gave meaning, direction, and purpose to his life. It gave faith to his skeptical and doubtful mind. As time passed, his love and devotion for Maharaji grew more and more. He has studied this story numerous times. It continues to transform him each time he studies it. He will skip some paragraphs from the book and start at page 70, first paragraph. Page 70, A Master and a Seeker, first paragraph. Performance of yajna or non-violent yajna for eating of flesh is a taboo in Samtavad. Performance of non-violent yajna had started, but with all the preparations and expense it involved. Gurudeva's solitary meditations were continuously on the increase. The service in the form of medical treatment too stopped. Finally, in the month of November 1935, however, communication with people, communication in terms of spiritual discourse, did not resume. Despite all the hectic activities associated with the yajna, one cannot truly relate to the word until the man in one is dead finally and irretrievably. Comment. In November 1935, the Master stopped his service in the form of medical treatment. Page 70, second paragraph. Then came the moment of a radical change in his life, in his external life. For from that moment onward, he became a man ever on the move. In the month of March 1938, he thought of going towards Kashmir with the intention of doing tapas in the solitude of its dense forests. He went to Rawalpindi to catch the bus for Kohala, a small town on the way to Kashmir. The bus, as it turned out, was empty and he occupied the front seat. Presently a man came and asked the driver to get the seat vacated for him. Then came another man and he too made him vacate his seat for him. Passenger after passenger came to repeat the rude act, with the result he had to vacate many seats, one after another. The cause of this behavior was nothing else than his plain, simple dress and his silent gentleness. A man had been noticing this behavior of the passengers for a long time. A relatively prosperous man he looked. His habit and the gun he carried on his shoulder showed his class. He felt outraged at this behavior, for those were the days of acute tension between the Hindus and the Muslims, with the air thick with the talk of partitioning the country into two parts, one for the Hindus and the other for Muslims. The demand for carving Pakistan out of India was formalized that very year. The passengers who had misbehaved with Sri Maharaji, for that is how his disciple later called him, the Reverend Lord, were Muslims, and the man with the gun on his shoulder was a Hindu. With a voice shrill with anger, he said, "It's a matter of great regret that everyone here has been so rude to him. What right anyone has to make him leave his seat? He is not traveling free, that you should behave so arrogantly with him." Comment. In 1938, a radical change came in the master's life. He became a man always on the move. In March 1938, he caught a bus for a small town on the way to Kashmir. He intended to do tapas or austerities in the solitude of dense forests. He sat on the front seat of the bus. A passenger came and asked him to vacate the seat. Passenger after passenger repeated this rude act, with the result he had to vacate many seats. The cause of this behavior was nothing else than his plain dress and gentleness. A man named Karamchand was noticing this behavior of passengers for a long time. He felt outraged, and with a voice shrill with anger, he said, "It's a matter of great regret that everyone here has been rude to him. What right anyone has to make him leave his seat? He is not traveling free, that they should behave so arrogantly with him. He is not traveling free, that you should behave so arrogantly with him." Page 71, A Master and a Seeker, first paragraph. None could utter a word in reply. Sri Gurudeva said, "Please don't be cross with them, you gentle soul. What difference does it make whether you sit on the front seat or the rear one? To reach the destination alone is the purpose here." Karamchand, for that was the name of the gentleman, requested Sri Gurudeva to sit along with him on the seat he was occupying. The demeanor of the master during the entire happening had made him curious to know more about him. So he said, "Who are you, sir, and where are you going?" "Premi, blessed devotee of the Lord, this is only a fakir, a bereft. It has heard about a thick and unfrequented forest at Hilsarang in Punch, where one can do tapas or austerities undisturbed by intruders. Nearby, they say, there live some Brahmin families too. Since you are an inhabitant of this area, you could do this the favor of introducing this to those among them whose dealings are straight and spotless. They could send this a few mouthfuls of food once a day." Comment. No one uttered a reply. The master asked Karamchand not to be angry with them. It did not make any difference whether he sat on the front seat or the rear one. He only wanted to reach his destination. Karamchand asked the master to sit with him. He became curious to know more about him. The master told him that he is a fakir, a bereft. He wanted to do tapas or austerities in a thick forest nearby. He asked Karamchand to introduce him to some honest persons who could send him few mouthfuls of food once a day. Page 71, a master and a seeker, bottom paragraph. In those days of easy relationships, people in India, especially at villages and small towns, saw nothing wrong in asking strangers about detail of their place of birth, their parentage, their schooling, their jobs, even the pay they received. Karamchand too put some of these questions to the master, to which he gave replies as far as he could. During the conversation, the master mentioned his school at Kalar. This information made Karamchand ask him more questions, for he was posted at the post office there during the days of master's schooling. He could also recall one of the young master's visit to the post office to collect the money sent in his name. The recollection rousing all the more interest the recollection rousing all the more his interest in the strange person sitting by him. How that young boy came to be a renunciate, a sage and a seer, he wondered. However, the words of introduction over, Gurudeva resumed his silence, uttering hardly a word on the way. Absorbed in the depths within him, all oblivious seemed he of the passengers and their frequent boarding and alighting, of Karamchand's curiosity and of the look of the landscape around. A silent astonishment possessed the latter, the awesome aura of the person sitting by him, making of him a mute spectator. Comment. In those days of easy relationships, people in villages and small towns of India saw nothing wrong in asking strangers about details of their place of birth, parentage, schooling, job, even the pay they received. Karamchand too put some of these questions to the master, to which he gave replies as far as he could. However, after the introduction was over, Maharaji resumed his silence, uttering hardly a word on the way. He seemed oblivious to all his surroundings. Page 72, a master and a seeker, first paragraph. Afternoon was about to melt into evening when the bus reached Kohala, a small town situated on the bank of Jhelum, the place where met two roads, one to Srinagar and the other to Rawalpindi. On the other side of the river were the frontiers of Kashmir and Punch. Nearby, a little above on the hills, was the border of the district of Hazara of the northwest frontier. About 2 kilometers above on a hill was situated a small village, Jalmada, surrounded with hills on every side, lines after lines of them. Lush green were the lower among them, and thickly covered with trees were the higher. Trees of varied shades of green, here light, there dark. Behind that delightful scenery of hills after hills stood the sublime beauty of the eternal snows of mountains. A little more than a kilometer below flowed the majestic Jhelum, making a curve that would force every traveler to pause and stare at its shape and shine. In the silence of the night, its music could be heard far away and far above on the hills around it. The landscape of Kashmir would not, even on its utmost borders, tolerate the ordinary appearance of the land on the other side of the river. Unique is the beauty of this land. It is not for nothing that they call it heaven on the earth. Comment. Kashmir has unique beauty of land. It has been called heaven on the earth. Page 73, first paragraph. Karamchand took Gurudeva to his own home at Jalmada. For full 2 days, he declined every request for a meal. On the third day, he agreed to take a small loaf of bread. The apparent reason: he had to satisfy himself that the man earned his living through straight and honest means. But I would say only apparent. He did not require 2 days to test the man. A minute, as many would testify, would have been enough for the purpose, even a fraction of a minute. The truth is that there had developed in him a disinclination for eating. An unpleasant task was it for him, though unavoidable. Anyone who saw him eat or drink could notice lines of aversion on his face, lines bordering almost on disgust. He had really lost all appetite, but he would not blow his own trumpet, would not show it to the world. So he continued to take a little for the sake of form. This would naturally sound incredible, but this life story will reveal many incredible phenomena which, but for the fact that many perceived them, would appear so to any man of sound common sense. Comment. Karamchand took Maharaji to his own home at Jalmada, a small village. For full days he declined every request for a meal. Only on the third day he agreed to take a small loaf of bread. Apparently, he wanted to satisfy himself that his host earned his living through honest means. A Master and a Seeker, page 73, bottom paragraph. The search for a proper place for tapas or tapa, self-burning, taking on oneself all that mortality would force upon man, began. But Hilsirang, despite its thick and leafy forests, did not have any spot that could be called suitable. Accordingly, the inhabitants of Jalmada requested him that he do his tapa at Jalmada itself, especially Ramditta and Sevaram. For impressed had been these two with the person and the words of the Master. So the search for Tapubhumi, the spot for ardent meditation, commenced. A few of his admirers assisting him for that purpose. Below the village was a lush green spot where once stood an orchard. But divested it had now been of the most of the fruit-laden trees, except a few here and there. Reaching that spot, Gurudeva paused and stood still and silent, all lost in thoughts or no thoughts, with eyes closed and the body almost frozen into stillness. The devotees too stood silent. None had the power or the will or even the desire to disturb that silence and that silent figure. So awesome was the aura and so holy the dread. After full 2 hours, Ramdita broke the silence and said in all humility, Maharaji, if the Lord so commands, a hut could be built here. Today we give up this place for the holy purpose. A sacred place will it be for the time to come. Comment. Some inhabitants of the village Jalmada were so impressed with the person and words of Maharaji that they became his devotees. They searched a place for tapas or austere meditation. They reached a lush green spot below the village with Manglaji. The master stood still and silent at this spot with his eyes closed and body still. The devotees too stood silent. After full 2 hours, a devotee broke the silence and humbly requested permission to build a hut there for the master. Page 74, a master and a seeker. First paragraph. The request evoked no response. The stillness and the silence continued as if nothing had been heard, nothing noticed. A good deal of time passed before he spoke, but in words strangely soft and slow, audible only to those that stood most proximate to him. This is the place, this is the spot where rishis of old did their tapa in times ancient. There should be a spring of water too here. Comment. The devotee's request evoked no response from the master. The silence continued as if nothing had been heard. A good deal of time passed before he spoke in soft words. This is the spot where sages of old did tapas or austere meditation in ancient time. There should be a spring of water also here. Page 74, a master and a seeker, second paragraph. The words sent a thrill of joy and wonder among the devotees. They begged of him that they be allowed to construct a hut there. A rock stood overlooking the place where the hut was constructed. Gurudeva asked them to dig up some earth behind that rock, from where gushed out a spring of water, clear and fast, making the spot look more beautiful than before. At this very spot, the seers of old had lived, doing fervent ardor, burning away all that they were and theirs in Agni, the light eternal that burned fierce and destructive within them. In that spot, where creation had died into God and God into creation, began the tapas to redeem the tapas, to redeem man and to redeem God. The date, March 23, 1938. Comment. His words sent a thrill of joy and wonder among the devotees. They begged his permission to construct a hut there. The master asked them to dig some earth at a spot nearby. A spring of water gushed out, increasing natural beauty of that place. He started his tapas or ardent meditation in that hut on March 23, 1938. Page 74, bottom paragraph. All the devotees were forbidden to enter the hut except for Sevaram. Every morning he would carry half a liter of milk with some leaves of tea boiled in it. The master's sole intake for the entire day. The 20 grams of cereals that he used to have earlier too were given up. After his morning bath under a spring of water that gurgled a little below the hut, he would remain all the 24 hours lost in samadhi. This ardent fervor, this tapas, soaked away almost all his blood, reducing his already frail body into almost a skeleton. You could, those who saw him then report, count virtually every rib of his and every vein. The pale complexion had become still paler, but the wonder of wonder was that weakening, that paling brought out a strange, arresting glow in the complexion, overspreading the pale on it, or transforming it. Comment. All the devotees were forbidden to enter the hut except one, Sevaram. Every morning he carried half a liter of milk with some leaves of tea boiled in it. This was the master's sole nourishment for the entire day. After taking his bath, the master remained 24 hours lost in samadhi or stage of final merger into God. This tapas or ardent fervor reduced his body into almost a skeleton. Virtually every rib and every vein of his body could be counted, but surprisingly, there was a glow in his complexion. Page 75, first paragraph. For 35 days went on that tapas, that fervent ardor, that absorption in samadhi. One night at the early hour of 2 a.m., Sevaram was awakened from his sleep by a voice that sounded like that of the master. He was sleeping on the roof of his house in the open to escape from the oppressive heat of the summer, almost at its zenith then. The place of tapas was at quite a distance. How could Maharaji, with his frail body, wake him up from such a distance, he wondered. Speculating about the possible cause of the call, he proceeded towards the hut with a lantern in his hand. He found the door a little open and entered the hut and prostrated himself before the master, the lantern dispelling the darkness within. Comment. The tapas or fervent ardor went on for 35 days. One night, at the early hour of 2 a.m., Sevaram was awakened from his sleep by the master's voice. The place of tapas or fervent ardor was quite distant. How could Maharaji wake him up from such a distance? He entered the hut and prostrated before his master. Page 75, A Master and a Seeker, second paragraph. All welcome to you, Premi, have been put to a great trouble and inconvenience. Sevaram looked up but could not bear the transcendental radiance emanating from that transcendental face. He directed his eyes towards the master's feet, amazement and wonder overwhelming him. In the meantime, other premis too arrived, for they too had heard the call. The two saw the splendor and light and the peace resting on that visage, but peace informed by an incomprehensible and impersonal melancholy. There was hope in them, there were fears, and there was the desire to look into that mystery, to plumb the depths that seemed immeasurable. But none could speak, could not even think of speaking. Silence absolute was their response to the not eventable event before them. Gurudeva asked them to sit down, apologetic about the trouble he had given them. Page comment. Sevaram looked up but could not bear the transcendental radiance emanating from that transcendental face. In the meantime, other devotees also arrived. They too heard the call of the Master. They too saw the splendor and light resting on that visage. Gurudeva or Maharaji asked them to sit down. He was apologetic about the trouble he had given them. Page 76, A Master and Seeker, first paragraph. We await the command of the Lord, for which He was gracious enough to call us to His presence, said one of them. In words soft, slowly and barely audible, said the Master, the purpose has been attained. The goal achieved for which was undertaken this sitting. Today, the term of the stay here too is at its end. To tell you all this has been given this trouble at this unusual hour. Sevaram, we do not feel troubled, we do not feel inconvenienced. Blessed are we that we came to behold the presence before us. Gurudeva, noble Premi, at the break of the dawn, this will bid you farewell. What should this do to repay the trouble this has given you? A poor one is this, no possessions it has, no means of recompense. Yet bid this do what you will. Sevaram, may not the Lord speak about the trouble? We never felt it, never knew it. Master, okay Premi, be kind enough to prepare some prasada or gift of grace. Immediately Sevaram went home to bring the prasada. The dawn was about to break when he came with it. The master told them that he had achieved the goal of his tapas or fervent ardor. He was searching that goal for 14 years. The term of his stay in Jalmada too was at its end. He told Sevaram to prepare some prasada or gift of grace. Sevaram went to his home to bring the prasada. The dawn was about to break when he came back with it. Page 76, A Master and a Seeker, bottom paragraph. With his own hands, Sri Gurudeva gave to each one present there the gracious gift in the form of halwa, the gift of grace which sets the receiver onto the path of redemption. Such is said to be the power of that consecrated food. Meanwhile, the dawn had brightened into morning, and then said he, "The time for departure has come. Your permission, Premis, this seeks." Sevaram. Let not the Lord add another sin to our life. Gurudeva. Premiji, for 14 years has this been in search of it. That what has come to it today at this place. This was the spot where during the days of the Vedas, the sage Sankadika did his tapa, and this Jhelum that flows a mile down flowed then here itself. The future too will see this place sanctified, and the Lord will shower His blessing on you all. Devotee. If this is the sanctity of this spot, then this slave of the Master would put a request before him. Gurudeva. Noble Premi, this deems itself not as different from you. Say you will and your wish. Devotee. Maharaji, this place has been sanctified with your presence and was sanctified by tapa of rishis of old. If the Lord permits, let there be a yajna or holy sacrifice. Let others too be blessed by the holy presence as we have been. Gurudeva, much will you have to spend and much to endure. Devotee, Maharaji, you, the Lord Blessed Himself, will do all. What have we in us to undertake that blessed act? Comment. Gurudeva gave prasada or gift of grace to each devotee. Then he asked them permission to depart. Sevaram requested his permission to hold a yajna or holy sacrifice because that place was sanctified by the Master's tapas. He had no trouble and he felt no trouble and was happy to go through all the expense and work it involved. Page 77, a master and a seeker, bottom paragraph. With the permission granted, the devotees busied themselves with the preparation for the yajna or holy sacrifice. The people in the neighboring habitats were informed, and so were informed those at Kohala. The 4th day of the lunar month of Jewish Jyeshtha, according to the Hindu calendar, was fixed as the date for yajna or holy sacrifice. The day that fell in the 3rd week of May. A large number of people came to get a glimpse of the man who had done the 35-day-long tapas on the strength of a mere glass of milk tea. Many who tilled the soil, many who worked as laborers, many who owned shops, and many among the faithful from amongst the Hindus, the Sikhs, and the Muslims. But no highbrow intellectual, for no one was there in that area, and no one from among those that administered or ruled. The poor came, and those that belonged to what is called the lower middle class. Among them came two young persons just past their teens who had later on the high privilege of serving the Master for long, one until the Master's Mahasamadhi, the final absorption in what is, the other until his own death. One was Banarsi Das, who came to be known by the epithet Bhagatji, the noble devotee, and the other Thakur Diwan Singh. Companions were they too, more than companions, more than friends. What one willed, the other did. The Sanskrit Sakha would the better description. Sakha, the same named, and for this reason, sharing in the same being. Both bowed down before the presence and sat down, all devotion and silent. Gurudeva was not in samadhi at that time and sat all awake under the shade of the tree near the hut. Looking at them, he said, "Where from come you two, Premijis?" Comment. With the permission granted, the devotees busied themselves with preparation of yajna or holy sacrifice. The people of neighboring villages were informed. A large number of people came to get a glimpse of the man who had done 35-day long tapas, surviving on a mere glass of milk tea daily. Among them came two young persons who had later on the high privilege of serving the Master for a long time. One was Banarsi Das, also called Bhagatji or noble devotee. The other was Thakur Diwan Singh. They were very good friends with each other. Page 78, A Master and a Seeker, first paragraph. Banarsi Das, I know not wherefrom do I come, great one. A smile appeared on the face of the Master, but soon he withdrew into himself, his eyes closed, the face turning into the awe-inspiring enigma. For long did Banarsi Das gaze on the presence that was not, and speaks thus about what he saw and felt then. The body was weak and frail, so destitute of flesh that one could see every rib of it, every bone and every vein. Even then the mind was so fixed on it, so absorbed, that I could not think of leaving the place. Did not have the feeling and will for doing so. From the depths within depths in me, I could hear as it were the voice, O Banarsi, here's your anchor, here's your support. From here alone will start your way the true. Your peace is concealed here, your bliss dwells here, their secret and their being. For the first time I knew what peace is, what tranquility is. Never had I known it, never felt. Lost was I in thoughts like these when the eyes of Maharaji opened. From the deeps of the deeps he was coming up. From the depths of Samadhi I felt as if he was attracting me towards him, dragging me towards that presence. Premis, said he, go you now, for the day comes to its end. Having uttered these words, he was lost again. Darkness was descending upon the hills, but we, both Diwan Singh and me, could not move, could not leave that presence. Again his eyes opened, and he asked us to go. But we lingered on for some time more, and then prostrated ourselves before him and left the place. Comment. The master got lost in samadhi or state of final merger in God. Even though his body was very weak and frail, Bhagatji was extremely attracted to him. He felt that he found his true anchor and support. For the first time in his life, he came to know peace and tranquility. He had never known it before. After some time, the eyes of the master opened and he told Bhagatji to go because the day had ended. But Bhagatji could not move. He lingered for more time and then left the place. This commentator also felt that Maharaji was his true anchor and support. His way the true started from him. He came to know peace the true only after following Maharaji. A Master and Seeker, page 79, first paragraph. The day of the yajna arrived. Every devotee, with no exception, worked with dedication, with devotion, with feelings of joy and tranquility despite the long labor lasting for days. There was no sign of weariness, none of tiredness or a trace of it. Fresh and energetic they worked, from one to all. Followers of every religion participated in that yajna. There were Hindus busy with making offering to the sacred fire, the Sikhs to do the continuous, uninterrupted recitation of the holy book, and there were Muslims to read the surahs and verses from the Quran. When the Hindus had poured their offerings, they came to him with a request to make the final offerings. The Sikhs came to request him to offer their last petition, and the Muslims to say the last namaz, the last prayer. He heard them all, the Hindus, the Sikhs, and the Muslims, and uttered these his words. Premies of the Lord, the last offering has already been offered here. The last prayer said, the last namaz performed. Complete your rituals and rites, and then assemble here so that something could be said about some contact made with that which is. Comment. The day of yajna or holy sacrifice arrived. Every devotee or premi, with no exception, worked with dedication. They felt joy and tranquility despite the long labor lasting for days. There was no sign of tiredness. They worked fresh and energetic. Maharaji asked them to assemble so that some contact could be made with God. Page 79, A Master and a Seeker, last paragraph. They completed their rites, said their prayers, offered their final namaz, and assembled to hear the words of the truth. Of bondage he spoke, and of freedom therefrom, and of the way that could lead one from one to the other, from bondage to liberation. Of the inevitability of suffering he spoke of. Of the inevitability of suffering he spoke, of the pain and anguishes of life, of the tragedy that it is, and of the way that could bring about the end of that suffering, that pain and those anguishes, the end of the tragedy we call life. If they wanted to live the life true, live it here itself, life free from every fret and fever, they should take to the life of simplicity, to reduction of desires and wants, and live as the Lord willed them to live, with their own will surrender unto His will, for it was in that, in His will alone, lay their peace. His body was weak, alarmingly frail, but the voice was firm. The conviction of the truth of what he said overpowered the weakness of the vocal cords and of the lungs. The words were simple and colloquial, the language like that of the non-learned. No high quotations were there, no high-flown sentences, not a ring of what they call eloquence. One could not distinguish the style from the content. Many among the audience sought refuge in him, requested and beseeched for a place, as they put it, at his feet, to be accepted as his disciples, to be set on to the path that led to the truth he spoke of. Two among them, Banarsi Das and Diwan Singh, dedicated their entire life to his service. That was the result of one short discourse, a living confirmation of the truth of the ancient saying that it is the Guru that chooses the disciple, not the disciple the Guru. A seer gives updesha, he simply points out. He does not give discourses, does not move to and fro as the Latin etymology of the word would suggest. Only the thing stands out when he speaks, not the word or the speaker. Comment. They assembled to hear the words of the truth. He spoke about how one can have freedom from bondage. He spoke about inevitability of suffering in life and how one can live free from every fret and fever. His body was very weak, but conviction of the truth, he said, overpowered the weakness of his vocal cords and lungs. Many among the audience beseeched to be accepted as his disciples. Two of them, Banarsi Das and Thakur Diwan Singh, dedicated their entire life to his service. Page 80, bottom paragraph. But to resume our story, the Updesha over, he gave his blessing to the assembly and asked the premies to distribute the prasada. By that time, the sky had come to be overcast with dark clouds, sending down rain in torrents, threatening to spoil the preparations made with hard and sustained efforts. Seeing their anxieties and worries, he said, "Take this too as His grace." To the comfort of the devotees, the rain ceased before the things could turn uneatable, and the distribution started. Those who served the guests were appeased, as were those who were served. For days the devotees had worked hard, and the day of yajna was particularly taxing. But where was the fatigue and where the burden? With affection they served, with love and with humility and with devotion, as if the guests would do them a favor by accepting their hospitality. With heads bowed, their hands folded, they made requests, repeated them to each one of the guests to take something for their sake, their satisfaction, even though he or she had had his or her fill. Such was the spirit, such the atmosphere that prevailed in that yajna, and as many would affirm, in the yajnas to follow. The congregation dispersed, the day melted into the evening, the sun going down behind the mountain of the setting. the sun going down behind the mountain of setting. The guests made obeisance to the master, one after another, each receiving his benign blessings. Those who had served them, till then fasting but satisfied, looked long at the departing rows of people, for love had gushed up in them even for those they never knew personally. People love individuals, but here they love the crowd. Each one among the crowd, each stranger seemed their Atmiya, the sharer of their being, their self. Comment. The instruction over, the master asked devotees to distribute prasada or gift of grace. Both servers and served were appeased. Devotees had worked very hard for many days, but there was no fatigue. They served with love and humility. The congregation dispersed. The guests made obeisance to the master and received his blessing. This is the end of episode. This is the end of part 5 of this story. It will be continued in part 6.